Welcome back to the Pragmatic Guide to Building Muscle. Today we are going to be talking about progression. This is our 6th video in this series and it could be the final one, but I do have a couple of ideas for future ones. Today we are going to talk about progression. Progression is a fundamental part of our training because if we're not progressing, we are unlikely to be building muscle over the long term. If you have been enjoying the series, please do give me a like on the video. If you have any questions about any video, leave them in the comments. And if you are not subscribed, please do click that subscribe button. Now, before we get into the meat of the video, I want to recap our memory on the decision filter. The training decision filter is how we are going to be looking at making any adjustments to lifestyle training program or making any type of decision regarding our progression over the long term. We need to ensure that our training program is specific enough to our muscle building goals. We need to ensure it is progressible and we can achieve overload. We need to ensure that it is something we can repeat over time, adhere to and enjoy, and shown to grow muscle. Progression is a big part of this decision filter because if we can't progress a training program, if we can't progress a stimulus or an exercise, we're not going to get the gains that we want. The big goal that progression is leading towards is overload. Overload is achieved through mechanical tension and having higher rates of this being accumulated over time. So before we can talk about rates of progress or how to progress, we need to understand overload fundamentally. Overload is a training principle and it dictates that when we're going through a training process that we need an increase in stimulus over time to keep our body adapting to it. Now, what is really happening underneath the hood is as you go through a training session, you have a high quality of stimulus, which is going to be driven by your sets, which are with a close proximity to failure. You're doing sufficient level of training volume. Your body, after that session, is going to adapt to that training stress. Now, as you come into your next session, if you were to repeat the same training load for the same repetitions, your body will now have adapted that stress. So you might find that set now, which was challenging the previous week, is now that little bit easier. So to actually cause your body to adapt further, you need to have an increased level of performance. An example here would be if you're doing 100 kilos for 10 reps on the bench press. If you do that today and it's very, very challenging, the likelihood is that next week, if recovery and everything is appropriate, that you will come in and that 100 kilos for 10 reps will not drive the same level of need for your body to adapt. So for you to keep up with the pace of your body adapting, you will need to have an increase in either load or reps. So your body has something again to adapt to, build up that resilience. So you come in the following week again and have another increase in training performance. So it's not necessarily the case that we're adding the load or reps to achieve the adaptation, but it's more so the case that your body has adapted to the training stress, and now to keep up with your body's rate of adaptation, you need to have that increase in performance or increase in reps or increase in load. And it's important to understand that this rate of adaptation can change, and that's why we have to come to our rates of progress. It's important to recognize that this is going to change as you get more trained. When you're a beginner and you're very fresh to training, it's likely that your body is going to adapt and respond really, really quickly to training. And what that leads to is a faster rate of progression. And this is because you just have a lot of growth potential still to go. You're likely not that strong, you likely don't have much muscle, so your body is going to rapidly adapt to the training and stress that you place upon it. So with this, if you're a beginner, you can probably expect to progress session to session, meaning you could realistically set a PB in every single training session you do for maybe the first 1 to 2 years. Now, as you pass the beginner stage, you're going to reach the intermediate stage, which a lot of people struggle to progress out from, usually due to an overcomplication of all the variables we went through in previous videos. The intermediate is going to be somebody who is going to have a slower rate of progression, but they're still going to be able to progress relatively well. They may notice that versus now progressing session to session and always setting PBs, that the PBs are now coming that little bit slower. And what they maybe should expect now is that progress is going to happen every other week. So it's not uncommon in the intermediate phase to have one session, maybe 2 weeks before you notice an increase in reps or load that is going to be an actual training PB. And that's kind of what we're talking about here in regards to rates of progression, because you could start a mesocycle and you could be increasing reps within it, but it's already a load or amount of reps that you've already done before, and you're building up towards that PB maybe in the later weeks of your training block. But as an intermediate, you should realistically, if your recovery variable is set up, be seeing some new progress every other week. Now, this slowdown progression, it is expected. You're much stronger than you were at the beginning. You have a lot more muscle than you had at the beginning. So now your body is really going to fight you tooth and nail because it doesn't necessarily want to put on much more size. It could be a case that in these weeks where you are maybe having a bit of a stall in reps or stall in load, that you have gotten stronger, right? Maybe that weight you moved the previous week, you couldn't go up with reps and you couldn't go up with load, but you find it feels a little bit easier. And here's what's happening. The smallest load increment we can put up in the gym is usually about 2.5 kilos. And that's the 1.25 kilos a side on a barbell movement, for example. Now, what if you had a 1 kilo increase in strength? That's not going to manifest in the amount of weight that you can put onto the bar. You may not necessarily be able to get an additional rep because that's also going to be a further strength increase that may supersede what you did make from an adaptation standpoint. But the rep increase is coming. Just stick with it. No, that set was a little bit easier this week. Next week, it could likely be coming. But this is something that I would absolutely encourage you not to second guess your program or second guess your approach. If you have a week or two where things are a little bit stalled, where it is reps or load, don't freak out because this is very much part of the training journey. And I guarantee you, if you can stick with those slower weeks, you will have progress coming at the end of it if you persevere and continue to nail your recovery variables. Now, if you break out of the intermediate phase and into the advanced, congratulations, you're one of the lucky few that's got there. You are now extremely jacked. You're probably really, really strong. And with that comes a painful realization that you simply cannot progress at the rate that you did, even when you were intermediate. And that was slow in itself. Advanced is going to be the slowest progression that we are going to start to see. And this person may only progress to new loads or hit new PBs every block. So this is hitting new training numbers or new training loads every block or so. And this is something you see all the time with powerlifters. Their exercise selection is very set in stone, and over time, their progressions from meet to meet will drastically slow down. They're not training any less hard. It's just the case that to get those extra 2.5 kilo PRs on their squat, their bench, their deadlift, it's just coming that little bit slower because their body is getting so close to their ceiling of strength and muscle mass that it's very difficult for them to continue getting towards the next PR. But with enough perseverance and solid enough progression scheme and solid enough block structures over a period of time, they will reach that point. By the time you get here, you're going to have pretty much everything dialed in. It's important to understand that through all these phases, these people are also trying to master their nutrition, master their sleep, master their stress. They're trying to improve their technique. They're trying to improve their ability to train hard. And this all is going to help them to continue to progress at rates that are completely different to this person here. This person here has everything nailed down. They have all the recovery variables locked in. They have a high level of training acumen. And just when they get to this point, because they have eked out all the progress in so many other areas, the next part is just the fact that their body is going to respond that little bit slower than it did at the start, because at a certain point, your body just doesn't necessarily want to have more muscle on its frame. So that brings us on to how to progress our training. So the three methods I use with my clients are single progression, double progression, and triple progression. Single progression essentially is we're changing one variable over time, hence the single component. This, in my opinion, is best done with load. So we're just adding load every single week, and this does have obvious caveats. For the beginner, they're probably going to be able to add load to an exercise every single week, especially on the big compound movements, leg press, the squat, their deadlift, their bench, and other compound movements of likes. They will likely still have to use the double progression for likes of isolation-based movements, but they'll probably still be able to add weight to something like a bicep curl or a cable-based movement every single week too, up until they reach the point where they're going to have to focus on progressing reps, then load. Single variable is best done with something that is more strength oriented. However, the shelf life is limited. And what you'll find is if you just look at increasing load across all your exercises, you will reach a point where you hit plateaus really suddenly on some movements, especially those isolation-based movements. So this is not one that I'd recommend for just doing hypertrophy or muscle gain work in general. My preferred method is going to be using double progression. Double progression is two variables. We are going to use reps, then load. We will be able to use this on most of our exercises. What I'd really be looking at here is using rep ranges, which we've talked about before in our intensity, volume, and frequency video. And I'm just going to use this as an example. With our rep range, we are looking to pick a weight that we're going to fail within this rep range. As we go through our training process, the way we're going to progress the stimulus is we may be doing something like 100 kilos for 6 reps. The following week, that 100 kilos for 6 reps is too easy, so we have to do 7. Following week, 8. Following week, 9. Following week, 10. Once you get up to 10, now we don't necessarily want to just continue adding reps and reps because that's going to become impractical. We want to keep within this band of intensity and continue to lift heavy. So we'll go to 102 kilos and then we will be able to start back at 6 or the bottom of the rep range. Now it doesn't have to be a case that you do 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, right? You're going to have some weeks where you notice you're able to go up 2 reps or 3 reps, or maybe some weeks you just go up 1, or some weeks where you match. That's going to be dictated by your experience level. But just keep it within this range and progressing this way, it allows us to focus on something that's going to be a little bit more tangible to increase over time versus just adding load onto every single exercise every single week. Double progression does have a very long shelf life and can be used across pretty much all of our movements. Now, there are some caveats in regards to particular rep ranges being a little bit easier to progress in reps than others. When we're looking at very low repetition ranges, like reps of 4 to 6, for example, having an increase from 4 to 5 reps is expecting about a 20% increase in strength from one week to the next. So it might take you a little bit longer to progress from 4 reps to 5 reps. However, if we look at the other end of rep continuum, where we look at maybe 12 to 15 reps, going from 14 reps to 15 reps is expecting a smaller level of strength increase from one week to the next, so that this may be a rep range that could be progressed easier. It's not a reason to use it, it's just setting some expectations here. And you might ask, why 6 to 10, why 4 to 6, why 8 to 12? It doesn't really matter all that much. The main thing is that you keep your unit of progression similar and you try to keep that progression band the same across time. So if you're using 8 to 10, stick with 8 to 10, don't just decide to go to 8 to 12. Now there are also additions here to say, well, some exercises again might call for having a bit of a bigger band. So if we look at the likes of a lateral raise, for example, a lateral raise, if you are trying to go from 4 to 6 reps, you are going to be a long time going from that 4th to 5th to 6th rep, because the unit of increase you'll have in a gym, 2.5 kilos, is going to be such a great percentage of your 1 rep max. And that move from 4 to 5 reps is also expecting a great strength increase. So with movements like that, where you are training a small muscle group and the unit of progression that you'll have available to you in the gym is also going to be realistically a great percentage of the max load that you could do for 1 rep, you probably want to have a bigger band of intensity. So with the likes of lateral raise, for example, you might decide, okay, I'm going to do 8 to 15 as my rep range, because maybe even if you get up to 12 reps or you get up to 10 reps, you can't go up that 2.5 kilos. So this is where just having some variability within how you're structuring your rep ranges and your progression system is going to make some sense. And then with big demanding compound exercises, maybe use a tighter band. If you're doing an RDL, a hack squat, a leg press, or a squat, because you know if you do 6 to 8 reps and you get to your 8 rep and you increase the load, that you're still going to be able to manage to get to 6 on that new training load that you're going to be using for that rep range. So it's important that you choose that rep range to suit the exercise and its rate of progression relative to the expected strength increase you could see in it. That leads me onto our final progression scheme, which is triple progression, which, as you have probably guessed, is going to be 3 variables. Now, this is something we can use for those stubborn movements that really don't have a great rate of progression. So we can stick with our lateral raise here for an example. So we might look at increasing reps first, then sets, then load. So what this looks like is that you could pick a set band. So you might say that you do 2 to 4 sets and you have 8 to 12 reps, and then you have your load. We do 2 sets of 8 to 12. Once we hit the 12, we may not be able to increase load on that lateral raise. So what we can do is we can add in an additional set. Bear in mind that I'm using a very small muscle group here with a small movement where we're not really using a ton of load. So this set progression is now giving us a slight increase in training stimulus or ability to create more training stimulus, because we're going to be able to get more reps close to failure and achieve more mechanical tension. Now, by the time we get up to 3 sets of 8 to 12, maybe we're not quite there getting that 2.5 kilos or up to the next set of dumbbells. Now, by the time we get up to 4 sets And we're doing 4 really good sets of 8 to 12 reps, pushing close to failure. Maybe that first set we're doing like 12 reps, then the second set we're getting 11, then 10 in the third, and maybe 9 on the likes of our fourth set. Now by the time we get up there, this is a good place for us to see that we're able to get a load of reps in across these rep ranges and across these sets. And now we're probably going to be able to warrant going up to that next set of dumbbells. Now we may just keep this for our isolations or stubborn lifts. Now a counterpoint to that is you could just have extended rep ranges here like I discussed. Again, it could be a case that first is just adding in more sets. We try to progress that lateral raise on its first set up to 15 reps. By the time we get up to 15 reps, we should be able to go up to the next set of dumbbells for 8 repetitions. So if you really want to make the most of your progression in the gym, I do think sticking with double progression as the main progression system is key to unlocking growth. Triple progression can be used sparingly, and it could even just be a case that you just extend the rep range out with your double progression system. Now, onto the final point that I barely have space to write here, but it's really important that you're tracking this, okay? Because tracking allows you to look back over what you did last week or the week before or from the previous block and ensuring that you're moving in the right direction and not just repeating loads and loads and loads over again. So we need to logbook. It's a common beginner mistake to just assume that they'll remember what they did in every single exercise when they come into the gym. And this is just simply impossible, but as well, it makes you very short-sighted. Once you get to the intermediate and advanced stage, having that data to look back over is absolutely crucial, because not only does it stop you from just repeating the same weights over and over again, but it stops you being complacent. If you look back to what you did the previous week and the week before, you have a list of PRs that you set in different exercises. That makes you want to come into the session and perform. Because if you are just coming in and kind of guessing or going by feel, it's unlikely that you're going to get into that mindset where you have to perform and you have to beat what you did the previous week. Having something as simple as a logbook where you're simply writing down your sets and reps for the session, as well what load you want to hit, that can just get you into the right frame of mind before you come into your session to smash it, achieve overload and achieve mechanical tension and ultimately build muscle. So that's it for this video. I hope you did enjoy this one. And honestly, once I started to incorporate this into my training when I was at this stage, it made my progression skyrocket. So take everything I talked about here, implement it into your training, and I guarantee you, you have so much more muscle gain on the way. That's it for today. If you did enjoy the video, please do give it a like. If you enjoyed the series, consider subscribing for more. And of course, if you have any suggestions for future videos, I'd love to hear them in comments, or if you have any of your own theories or things that work particularly well for you, just drop them into the comment section. That's it. Have a great week, and we will catch you in the next one.